We got back from Houston yesterday as the Owls went down on Saturday in the American Athletic Conference Championship game by a score of 24-13. The Cougars will go on to the Peach Bowl, and Temple will go on to the Boca Raton Bowl, where they will play Toledo. Now joining us on the hotline is the play-by-play voice of the Temple Owls on 97.5 The Fanatic, and that's our good friend Harry Donahue. Harry, Zach Gelb here. Thanks for a few minutes. How are you?
How you doing, Zach? I'm doing fine. Thanks.
Well, I'm doing great, and I'm just going to say this, Harry. You went to Puerto Rico earlier in the year for Temple. You were in Houston last weekend. I know you like to play a lot of golf, and now you're going to Boca. Temple's starting to spoil you.
Yeah, well, I'd rather maybe give up the golf to get a chance to play in the Peach Bowl, but what are you going to do?
And now Temple, they're the runner-up in the American Athletic Conference. It's not a major bowl game in the Boca Raton Bowl, but I'm fine with it because of recruiting, the location, and of course it gets them done before Christmas. Are you satisfied with the bowl selection that Temple was given?
Well, yes and no. I think a team that finishes second in the conference and loses in the championship game may have had a higher profile bowl, but I realize how things are done. I mean, that's simply because of the conference that Temple belongs to. The American Athletic Conference has certain deals, tie-ins with certain bowls, as opposed to Power 5 conferences that have more marquee bowls. I mean, just for instance, Penn State, which finished overall 7-5, lost to Temple, is playing in a January 2nd ball game against an SEC opponent. That will have a higher marquee, probably will have higher TV ratings, but that's the world we live in right now, Zach. And, it's a chance for Temple to display itself on national television. Like you said, you get it over with before Christmas, but I think there's a lot of people probably would like and think the Owls deserve to be in a bigger bowl.
The Owls have had such a tremendous season, regardless of what happens in the bowl game up against Toledo. And you know that, covering for this team for so many years. But this American Athletic Conference really hit a home run this year. 8 teams going to bowl games, and it really was a conference that had 4 teams in the top 25, the best non-Power 5 conference, in my opinion, this year. Moving forward, what else do they have to do to really get that respect nationally?
Move into the Power 6, that to me would be, I think, what they have to do, although I don't know what the realistic chances of that happening are. But you're right. I mean, the conference certainly held its head high in terms of what they did during the season, and no better example of that is Temple when it comes to television ratings and doing a good job against non-conference opponents, winning against Penn State and putting everything out there on the line in the last 2 minutes, losing to Notre Dame. What more can you ask for? So, it's unfortunate the season didn't end with a championship, but I think the better team won on Saturday, as you witnessed down there in Houston. The Cougars, they're a tough football team. I mean, they have all the components. Their rush defense was outstanding, and they pressured. I think they probably blitzed. If we looked at it and broke it down, I'd have to talk to Phil Snow, or not to Phil Snow, I mean Morris, the offensive coordinator. But they probably, I would say, blitzed P.J. Walker about 70-75% of the snaps. I mean, he was running for his life a lot down there, and they forced, of course, 2 turnovers early, which I think decided the game. And let's face it, Temple's driving there, even after the first turnover, come right back, get it down to the 10-yard line, and Robbie makes a great catch in traffic and then is stripped of the ball. If they hold on to the ball there, they're going in. They're going to tie that game up in the first quarter. It's going to change the whole atmosphere down there, and it was a great atmosphere. Hats off to the student section down there. It seemed like they never shut up the entire game.
Yeah, I was talking to someone from the Temple football team yesterday, and that said that was the loudest atmosphere Temple has ever played in, and that's really was surprising to me. But yeah, I was there, and you're exactly right. The students brought it from the start to the finish. But you mentioned that early turnover, and you're right. That's just a throw P.J. Walker can't make, and it was he's getting blitzed all day. The offensive line didn't do a good job. But Matt Rhule talks about it all the time, about Temple living in the moment and being ready for the moment. Were they just not ready for the moment on Saturday with those turnovers?
I don't know about that. I mean, it was a mistake, and we haven't seen PJ do that. I think he, got caught up in the blitz, and he wanted to deliver it. He probably just should have thrown it away or even taken the sack at that point. He threw off his back foot. But like I said, even after that, still to come back on the next drive and get it downfield, go vertical, get it to Robbie, and then Robbie getting stripped. And that, looking, what are they? I think number 2 in the nation in turnover ratio. I'm talking about Houston's defense. That's all they do is force turnovers. So maybe Temple should have. I'm sure they prepared for that, but once you're out there in the heat of battle, it's a whole different ball game. I think I would have liked to see more vertical chances taken in the passing game than we did. And Robbie had 12 catches, and made a couple circus catches and big plays. But I think especially there late in the fourth quarter, midway through the fourth quarter, I would have liked to see maybe a couple more shots taken, because that was the only way we were going to beat that team. They were outstanding against the running game. It was, 70 yards, I think, for Jihad Thomas, and he earned every one of them. But the only way to beat Houston would have been to go a little more vertical than I think Temple was doing.
And this whole Temple offense, the entire season, really starts with the battle in the trenches. And I know that sounds cliche, but they love to run the football first, and then it sets up the play-action pass for P.J. Walker. And they get Kyle Friend back. And if you'd have told me before the game, Temple would have played their worst game of the season from an offensive line standpoint with Kyle Friend back in there, I would have said you're crazy. What went wrong with that offensive line?
I think it was just the pressure. 8 and 9 guys in the box, and they were coming on every play. They were run blitzing. They were pass blitzing. That was an outstanding defense that Temple saw. I mean, we all know how well Temple's played and has risen up to the occasion defensively all season long, with maybe the exception of that Notre Dame play at the end of Fuller. But the Houston Cougars, boy, they were swarming around the ball, and like I said, putting pressure on PJ the entire game. 75% of the time, he was under a lot of pressure. They were coming from the left side, they were coming from the right side, corner blitzes, safety blitzes, and it also, I think, impacted the running game. But to turn it around a little bit, you got to look at the difference in the game. As good as the defense was for Houston, Greg Ward Jr. What an outstanding quarterback. I mean, Temple has had trouble, let's face it, Zach. The 3 losses have been against the common denominator, option quarterbacks. We saw it with Deshaun Kaiser and that big run that was the first scorer against Temple in the Notre Dame game. We saw it with Flowers at South Florida, and we saw it on Saturday with Greg Ward Jr. For some reason, Temple's defense this year has really struggled against option quarterbacks, and it happened again on Saturday.
We're spending a few minutes with Harry Donahue, the play-by-play voice of the Temple Owls on 97.5 The Fanatic. And as great as Greg Ward was, and let's be realistic, you have to give, like you were saying, Houston credit. They're excellent coach by Tom Herman, who comes over from Ohio State and only has 1 loss with the Cougars this year, and that was without Greg Ward Jr. Temple did make their adjustments defensively in the second half going up against Greg Ward Jr. What did you see change with this Temple defense from half number 1 to half number 2?
I think they, the defense, so you're right, they outscored Houston in the second half. Then the other thing was that they really took their leading receiver, DeMarcus Ayers, out of it. He didn't have 1 catch in the whole game, first half or second half. Of course, Chance Allen hurt them a little bit, especially early in the ball game. But whatever it was that Phil did in terms of changes and schemes in the second half, we were forcing back-to-back 3-and-outs, and I thought that's when Temple was really going to have a chance, and they did have a chance to get back in the ball game. But Greg Ward Jr. set the tone early in that game, and then turn it over to his defense, because the second half, Houston was not the same offensively as they were in the first 30 minutes of that game.
And honestly, that's the big difference for me. When you take a look at the full game of 60 minutes, Temple was able to move the ball on their side of the field. But, Harry, once they got on Houston's side of the field, I don't know what was happening. They just couldn't do anything.
Yeah, and the other thing was Houston had, by virtue of the turnovers, a lot of short field opportunities. And that's the one thing, turnovers will kill you. Temple's defense all season long has come up with turnovers, big plays. This week, it just wasn't there. Even we got another blocked punt, but the ball still was able to squirt downfield for about 40 or 45 yards, A lot of times, you get those little tips and get your hand on a punt and you get the ball deep in the opponent's territory and you capitalize. So it just, that's the way the cookie crumbles, And as I said, give Houston credit. They had the home field advantage. They took advantage of that. They had a great offensive scheme, at least in the first half. They took advantage of that. And their defense, time and time again, hurried the choices, the options that P.J. Walker's had, put a lot of pressure on him, and Temple just didn't have any answers. How about, I mean, even in the beginning of the game, Zach, I mean, that hurry-up offense, Temple was struggling to get players on the field. They obviously slowed it down. You can't keep that pace up. But, I mean, that was Chip Kelly-esque back at Oregon, the way they were running in that first offensive series.
It really was. And then talking about the hurry up on the other end for Temple, in those final few minutes of that game, there was just no sense of urgency. I asked P.J. Walker how he thought the clock management was after the game, and he said he thought it was fine. I just thought that was a really brutal performance when he kept on looking at the sidelines in those final 5 minutes of the game. It just seemed like they had no sense of urgency there, Harry.
Yeah, there was one play in particular where they came up to the line of scrimmage, and there was indecision, P.J. looking over to the side, and then letting the clock wind down, and then they finally took a timeout. And I don't know the exact number of seconds that elapsed, but I'd have to say it was close to 40. And you can get 3 plays off in 40 seconds. I thought, even though they had some timeouts, they were reluctant to take that first timeout. And when they finally did, they kind of wasted about 40 seconds. I'd agree. I think clock management, if you slowed it down and looked at it in perspective, and it's always 20/20 in hindsight, but you're right. There with about 6 or 5 minutes to go, it looked like the Owls were coming up to the line of scrimmage with a 10-point lead rather than trying to come back from a deficit.
Wrapping up with Harry Donahue, who joins us right now. And you've done these games for so many years. You've seen the ups and downs of Temple football. They started the year out up against Penn State with the first victory in 74 years, then had that really tremendous evening up against Notre Dame where they were a drive or two or a play or two away from winning that football game. Just doing these games all these years and seeing the growth of this program. How do you describe this season so far?
It's been a magical carpet ride. I mean, it's cliche, but it really has been the way this team has been put together and what they've done over the course of 3 years under Matt Rhule. It's just been an outstanding ride, not just for the coaches and the players and administrators, but their long-suffering fans. And a lot of people have, never bailed on Temple over the course of some really late years. And this year they finally have something to celebrate. They get the championship? No, but they played for it. I mean, who would have thought even 2 years ago with a 2-10 record that Temple would have turned it around as quickly as they did, led by the seniors. Let's face it, boy, we're going to miss guys like Matakevich and Matt Ioannidis. Can you meet a nicer guy than Matt Ioannidis? Not only on the field, but off the field. All the leadership that those guys have brought. Kyle Friend, you mentioned earlier. Temple's going to miss these guys. But now they're in a position where they weren't, years ago, even 3 years ago, of having lost guys, but have people come up, the whole next guy up thing. And that is going to, I think, really be a determining factor in the success they have going on from here. And it looks like Matt's going to stay around because he's a great leader for these guys. He's always positive. He's a tremendous recruiter. And look at this conference. Look what's just happened in the last few days in this conference. Matt Rhule now, I think is the number 3 in terms of seniority in coaching at a conference school. You got the guy at Navy, you got Tuberville at Cincinnati, and Matt now is 3rd in terms of seniority, and he hasn't even put in 3 full years yet. So things are really turning around in the American Athletic Conference. It's a better coaching league than it was, obviously, from 3 years ago, and now just in the last, few days, what the kind of talent that they've brought in. It's going to be pretty exciting for next year.
Matakevich is 11 tackles away from tying Steve Conjar's record of 492 career tackles at Temple University. You've been the voice of the Owls, like we've been saying for so many years. Where does Matakevich rank amongst players that you covered for Temple?
Best player since defensive player since Joe Klecko, which is back in the early mid-'70s, my personal opinion. Danny Klecko was a great player. He was Conference Player of the Year for a bad Temple team back in the Big East days. And Tyler is Player of the Year in this conference with very tough competition. Let's face it, I think it's really understated how good this conference is. But for him to be also, Zach, voted the only player as a unanimous selection for first-team all-conference, either on defense or offense, says legions about the quality of what this kid has done as a football player at Temple University. And I would place him number 2 behind the great Joe Klecko, who played, of course, for years in the NFL with the New York Jets, member of the SAC Exchange, and Tyler Matakevich is right there.
You talk about all those great seniors, obviously headlined by Tyler Medikevich, and you just feel like they deserve to win that final bowl game. I know it's going to be tough to move on, but, after probably Wednesday or Thursday, you're going to have to move on from this American Athletic Conference championship game, and it's what next has been the mentality all year. Are you confident Temple's able to move on from that loss and go out with the win up against Toledo?
No, I think so. I don't think Matt Rhule's going to let these guys rest on their laurels, especially rest on a defeat coming out of the AAC championship game in Toledo. We thought we saw the last of MAC opponents, right?
Yeah,
right. Here we are going up against the Rockets again. At least we won't have to go back to Ohio. I feel like I spent half my broadcast career in the state of Ohio.
Well, the golf weather will be better in Boca Raton. I know you're a big golf guy.
Hey, you know what else? Yeah, I looked at the field. It's FAU Stadium. It's the house that Howard Snellmanberger built down there when he revitalized football, coming, of course, his great experience at Louisville and then the University of Miami. But their mascot is the Owls. They're one of 4 teams with the Owl mascot in college football. And they have the Owls already on the field in the end zones. So they, at least on one side of the field, they won't have to change that. But maybe that'll be a good luck charm. And I think Temple is going to be in great shape. Matt won't let them rest. Medikevich won't rest. Ioannidis, Friend, all those guys won't rest. They want to get a victory and end their season 11-3, the only team in Temple history to get 11 wins in one season. And I think they're going to go out with a huge bang.
Well, Harry, you're the best. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you again real soon.
All right. Remember, it was, 2 months ago I said we may be winding our season up in Fiesta. I said it right there.
You did.
On, Whip Radio.
I will give you the credit. You did. You were very close. And you know what? It's something that if you would have told me 4 years ago when I started at this university as a freshman, I would have said you're nuts. But it just goes to the credit that Matt Rhule has done. And you were dead on. You called that right from the start.
All right. Well, listen, I want to say congratulations to you guys, what you do as a student radio, traveling like you do to cover, not just for your own careers, but for your loyal followers and listeners. And hats off to you guys. I hope you enjoy the bowl game as much as everybody else does.
We will do. Thanks so much, Harry. It really means a lot.